The following piece is something that I wrote as a final paper for an honor seminar that I took the first semester of my freshman year entitled Hallucinations. So the class was mainly taking place from a neurology and psychology standpoint, looking at hallucinations, how they originate, and some of the medical conditions associated with them. For our final project, we were encouraged to take this topic and idea of hallucinations and incorporate it in any way that we saw that best fit with our interests. For me, as someone who is both a pre-medical student, but someone who is extremely interested in law, policy, and ethics, I really saw this as an opportunity to try and find where all of these different topics started to intersect. The idea of writing a paper about solitary confinement and thinking about the practice altogether really wasn't something that originated from a lot of research. It really just kind of popped into my head after reflecting upon everything that we'd learned in the class and how hallucinations can start to take on in someone's mind. And so once I started to think about this topic, I really started to question the ethics of having such a practice in which a person can be isolated for days, weeks, months, even years upon time by themselves. And very quickly, I saw in my research, they would start to develop these really vivid hallucinations. So I had this initial spark in my mind that this was so clearly unethical to me. And when I talked to other people about it, they said, these people, they're criminals. Why would it be unethical when you consider the things that they may have done in their past and how unethical those things obviously could have been? And so because of this and because of how conflicted I felt between these different viewpoints of whether or not this practice was actually ethical, I decided to pursue a more methodical approach. So as you can see in the paper, I broke down my ethical analysis in 3 different areas. I considered, of course, the medical perspective. I am interested in going into the medical field later in life, specifically in health policy. And so I wanted to consider if, as a doctor, I would have considered this ethical, which obviously not, because you're essentially imposing an illness upon another person. I also considered the legal aspect, whether or not this is cruel and unusual punishment or if this is something that is legally justified. And finally, I considered it from a prison perspective, which is what a lot of people appeal to when they say that this isn't an ethical practice. And so I wanted to dig at this deeper question really about what the purpose is of our prison system and whether or not we should be solely punishing people or we should seek to try and rehabilitate them. So that's a little bit about what I get into in the paper. The reason that this paper is really so important to me is because it really represents the culmination of all of my different interests. I am someone who's looking into health policy, but I also have a deep interest in law and ethics. And so I wanted to see where all of these different areas could overlap. And I realized that there's actually a lot more overlap than I ever previously thought there could be, especially in a class that I really took just because I needed to take an honor seminar for the semester. I started to grow even more passionate about the material that we were learning in class once I was able to find out how it related to something that I really care about. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this, is whether or not it's solitary confinement or climate change or something that you're learning about in your classes that you can really grab onto and find that you're passionate about it and passionate enough about it to take on something bigger like a 15-page research paper that initially terrified me so much to think about writing. But the moment that I started to get absorbed into this idea, I found myself being willing to go way past the page limit. And so that is really my goal for the next 3 years, and what I hope your goal is too, and that is to just find something that you're so passionate about that it really is what drives you for all of college and beyond. So thank you so much for your interest in my paper, and I hope that you enjoy it and it makes you think.